welcome Debasmita and Swadesh. As I think she was introducing, many of you may know him. He's a seasoned industry leader. Of course, very, very passionate about creating a great workplace foundation, has a lot of experience in the industry and leads the people function at Titan. Thank you, both of you, for joining us. I'm Preeti. I'll be anchoring the conversation. Of course, I think many of you have been regulars in this learning series with us, and it is so wonderful to see that sense of community, because we have been talking about health and well-being now, of course, for the last couple of years maybe, but even longer than that. Today the focus is very close to our heart. It is around mental well-being, and so many of us have seen I think things very up close, especially in the last 2 years. Thank you to those who have shared your questions while registering with us. And the ones who are regular know the structure, but let me take a moment to walk you through the structure, how we will be structuring this. Of course, we keep a focused time for Q&A with the audience, which is towards the end of the session. In the beginning, today, we are also taking the opportunity to maybe spend about 5 minutes for us to share some of the findings that we have seen in our research at Great Place to Work in the area of health and well-being. So I'll spend about 5 minutes doing that. Then we deep dive straight into conversation, learning from the experience of Swadesh and Debasmita. Both come with very rich experience in the area. And even while designing the conversation, we have taken into account some of the aspects you shared with us, because I think we had about almost 80 people who shared their questions when they signed in. And feel free to chat in your questions even while we are having the conversation. And towards the end, obviously, we have about 15 minutes dedicated only for Q&A. So feel free to keep chatting in or sharing a comment. I think the good part is that we're all in this together. There is to learn, not just our research, but the richness comes through your experiences, right? And we have leaders across multiple industries with us today. So thank you for joining us. Let's dive straight in. I'll take, like I said, about 5 minutes to just quickly run through you some research. Don't worry about making notes, etc. We will share this document with you, so it will come to you, right after the session today. But do feel free to chat in any questions that you may have, and we will take them up towards the end or during the conversation. Yeah. I hope you all can see my screen. Okay. So this is not new to us. I think it is just being emphasized. The interesting figure over here for me, I think when we started the research at Great Place to Work was, I think, pre-pandemic or just early pandemic. This number on the right of $6 trillion was actually $3 trillion when the first estimation was done. And I think the impact of it doubling has happened through, of course, data coming to us from WHO and Lancet. But this is definitely the impact of the pandemic. And that's why very often...
I don't know if it is me. I can't see your screen. So the presentation...
You can't see the screen?
No, neither can I.
Oh, okay. I think, I saw you nod. So my bad then. Okay, let me just reshare. Okay. Okay, Himanshu or someone from the team, can you just enable this for me? I can't, I'm not able to share the screen. Himanshu or Shambhavi, can I request you to share the screen or put up the PPT, either of the two, please? Yes. Okay, can you just move the slide or just give me the rights to the screen, please? Thank you. Just bring the PPT up again. Yeah, can we move to the next slide? Yeah, keep it at that. Then I'll probably ask you to keep moving the slides. Thank you. Yeah, sorry about that. So, like I was saying, the data here is known to all of us since it's in the public domain. Of course, WHO has been studying the impact of the pandemic, not just on mental health, but overall. And we are aware that the instances of mental health concerns, whether it is stress, anxiety, depression, all of it has gone up. And the estimate is more than 25% increase globally, if I look at it. What I was referring to, the number was that they have said that this is actually the invisible pandemic that very often we don't really realize because it's not there, it's not very visible, but the impact is huge. And the estimate of not being able to address it was showing as the $6 trillion on the screen right now. It was estimated at $3 trillion when we first looked at it around 2018-19, and this has just doubled. So it just tells us the impact that could have if we are not proactive about health overall and specifically mental health, because very often it gets missed, being less visible and less prominent. Yeah, we could move to the next slide. So this again, I won't deep dive into it. The first time ever, WHO has shared a framework. So they have brought out a template of policy of mental health at work. And of course, the request is for governments, for corporates to play a very, very significant role and be able to develop this across our organization. We'll not deep dive into it, but I just wanted to bring it up because this is also the first time that they have said that we should actually sensitize and enable our managers in our organizations to help them take care of their own well-being and of course of the well-being of their teams. Yeah, we could move ahead, Himanshu. Yeah, so we at Great Place, of course, are committed to partner with organizations to really develop cultures which are focused on holistic well-being. Move ahead, Himanshu. We do this across three ways, really, right? We want to, of course, work with organizations. Many of you have also been working with us, and together, I think we can handle this better. The second is really at the individual level. As well-being, we all know, is so personal, right? Even if we have 20 benefits that organizations provide us, if we don't take ownership of our well-being, it just won't happen. So as a part of our framework, we also focus on really nudging the individual to take ownership of their own well-being. We have a small tool related to that as well. And of course, with the community, the strength comes from the community, from all of you who contribute to this. And the fact that I think the pandemic has only taught us that none of us had the playbook, but it was only because we came together that we could navigate this problem together. Yeah. So just moving to quickly a few insights that we saw. So we really, as you know, that study, conduct an annual study. And in the last one, we were looking at the employee voice, and 78% of the people who reported a high burnout showed a intent to leave. Whereas when we look at people who say that, yes, I'm not continue when I'm exhausted, right? When I'm not, pressured that, okay, if I'm feeling exhausted, if I can express it and tell it in my organization, if that is the experience people have, we saw that they had a 2.8x kind of intent towards staying. So on one hand, when we are talking about the great resignation and all our companies really struggling to retain their people, something which shows us very clearly when people say, what's the ROI or where's the data? This is a very interesting data point that we saw in our research. Yeah, we could go to the next. Himanshu, we could move. Yeah. Here, I know you see a lot of data on the slides. I won't get into all the points. The reason we put this up was we said, okay, what is the difference between organizations that focus on health and well-being and the ones who don't? So the blue figures are all from the best. But what we wanted to showcase was, if you look at the top line, right? And as I said, we'll be sharing this, it's all around leadership behavior, right? How do we, because it's like anything else that it starts from the top. So it's the leaders who role model the right behaviors. They are the ones who will set the tone and create the right culture where people really are inspired to give their best. Yeah. So it talks about consistency of action. It talks about being open to listening to ideas, It's about openness to admitting mistakes, and that's how innovation happens. So your top line is all around how leaders behave at best workplaces. And the bottom line is actually about how we make them feel. Yeah. So we looked at, and this is of course too many, but we looked at 10 areas, and then we actually zeroed in to look at the top 5 out of this. But I'll just share about any one. So if we take the second one on the second line, which talks about, at my organization, people can speak up about feeling stressed or burnout. And if we deep dive into that, just one area where people had a positive experience around that one statement, I'll just show you what we saw. We can move to the next one. Yeah, so just that one point, we saw that people who had a positive experience on that one aspect, they were 2.4x more likely to believe that they had a fair say in decisions, 2x more likely to be inspired and find meaning in their work. We saw a similar thing when we said another actionable areas, which was around grievance redressal, and there we saw a 3x, around retention, and similarly around discretionary efforts. So no rocket science here. I think the good part is we started with a slide which talked about the cost of not addressing this to be trillions of dollars. And what we find is that the cost of addressing it is actually negligible. It's just about the how of doing things and doesn't really require loads of money or some huge policies. Yeah. Yeah, just the next one, please. We also look at understanding emotions through the individual tool that I spoke about, which is Wellbeing Indicator. And we just asked employees to share. It was a simple question which asked employees to share, how often do you experience these emotions in the workplace context? Yeah. And it was a frequency scale moving from a never, not at all to a regularly, always. Yeah. So we looked at one aspect. So what you see on top are your positive emotions. The one in the bottom line are more not so positive emotions. And we focused on one. So for example, people who experienced inspiration at workplace, and this is directly again to leaders, how do we make people feel inspired about what they do or where they belong? Yeah. So that's that one dimension. And what you see on the screen is this. So these 6 areas are what we have seen as the 6 levers of workplace wellness index, of driving a holistic culture of well-being. And what you see as the outer line are people who reported a regularly or an always experience of inspiration. And the inner lighter green circle is of people who did not experience inspiration frequently. And just look at the gap between the two. Yeah. So this is simpler to do. This is not spending huge amounts of money, but making people feel inspired about what they do and being a part of the organization that they are in. Yeah. Yeah, move to next. And this is like my last slide. We then looked at within emotions. We're always talking about that, how do we manage stress? I think out of the 80 questions we got, at least 30% are talking about how do we actually not 30, maybe 40% are talking about how do we manage stress. Yeah. So we compared high stress, low stress, and we compared high happiness, low happiness. Yeah. This is frequency, people saying it themselves, and specifically in workplace context, not personal. So it's common sense that if someone is saying low stress versus high stress, people with low stress will do better, which is your green number. So that's the gap factor. Sorry, the pink one is the low stress versus high stress. The green is low happiness versus high happiness. So we said if you had to choose one on what to focus on, I think if you focus on giving some moments of inspiration and getting people to feel happy of being in our organization, the multipliers are just amazing, from a 1.8x to a 3.1x on retention. Similarly, you see the others. Yeah. So these were just a few things that we wanted to put out today. Of course, there's a deeper research report available. We'll be happy to share it with all of you when we send you the recording. So really coming back to simple, this thing, the PPT has gone off, Himanshu. Can you just bring that back? To really say that how do we ensure that we are focusing on creating a culture of holistic well-being? Yeah, just move next for a minute. I know, and I said the last slide, it was on the research data points, but just to sort of close the message. Yeah, move next. Just to quickly summarize, just put all of the points there, just to quickly summarize in terms of, what do best workplaces focus on? We say that it we have to move to a preventive approach, as against saying that, when I have a cut on the finger, I go address it. And we don't even realize if there is a emotional, if emotionally I'm feeling low, or very often we are in a denial, right? And similarly, really using a framework based approach, leaders, of course, role model in an organization. How do we create an environment of psychological safety? And that's something we'll deep dive in with both our speakers right away. Enabling people managers, which I think WHO is also focusing and telling us to do. Empowering our employees, because I think no one size fits all. We have to let them choose what is best for them, and I think they are well suited to do that. Yeah, and definitely consistently checking on our employees. So we really invite all of you to be a part of this movement and join the movement of making India a healthy place to work for all. With that, I think we'll just dive into the questions. The tools, like I said, we'll share this information with you, and happy to kind of share details with whoever is interested in. And of course, have you as a part of the movement. Many of you are, of course, already working with us. Yeah, you can take that off, Himanshu. So let me just thank both of you once again, of course, for being patient and also actually investing your time. So let me start with you, Swadesh. I think we've at Great Place had the privilege of really learning from Titan over the last few years. And you have a very strong foundation of uh, building a culture of holistic well-being. So it'll be great if you could just tell our audience, give us an overview of the overall people structure and what is the philosophy of well-being at Titan.
Thank you so much, Preeti, and I'm really excited to be here. And thanks for this timely session, because it's so important, as you rightly mentioned. The scars of COVID, it runs very deep even today. And while the framework which you mentioned spoke about prevention, protection, and support, but I think there is one step which is before that, and this is a silent pandemic, like where finding out person who's going through it is extremely important. So only then you will get into the prevention mode, right? So, and the silent pandemic basically means that, like, if some people are going through those emotions, sometimes they don't know whether they are having some, mental well-being issues. So that's the first thing. And as an organization, while we have a people first philosophy, just like any other organization would have, in wherein we don't talk about only our employees, we don't stop at our employees, but we speak about the entire larger ecosystem in which Titan operates, which would mean the vendor partners, the franchisee employees, even contractual staff. I think it takes an army to win a war, right? So we feel that, like, everybody who is connected to Titan, how we can do something and ensure that we can create a psychological safety net for them has been mission for the organization for quite some time, right? And I think after pandemic, like, and many organizations did a lot of stuff. And I think here I'm speaking to great places to work organizations. I'm sure there must be some amazing, interventions they must have undertaken to ensure that, during COVID times, people are well looked after and build that psychological safety net around them. So other than, small stuff like, doctor on site, online consultation services, insurance policies, really looking at it, and even going beyond the employee and giving insurance policies to our extended family, which is, I mentioned about vendor partners, franchisee employees. I think a whole host of stuff which we did. So I'm not talking about that, what we did during the COVID time, but it is the effort of creating a psychological safety net, which was there, which was the mission which we started when the COVID period was there, has been continuing. And one example of that is, like, when we had, during COVID time, we had started this calmness coach services, where we have 4 calmness coaches assigned. And at that point of time, and these are all one-on-one sessions, and we used to find around 100 odd people who used to avail this, services. And the number hasn't gone down. It has come down to 70, 80 now. But clearly, and obviously the stress levels were much higher during COVID time. This clearly shows that while the pandemic is over, I think the mental wellness or the silent pandemic is still on and gripping. And if we don't do anything about it, I think we are in for trouble. I think it's gradually will suck away a lot of effort from every organizations to deal with it if we don't take measures at this moment. So obviously from an organization philosophy point of view, anything what we do, we keep people at the center for any decision, how it is going to impact. That has been the philosophy of Titan. And the people centricity is one which drives the organization. And while you walk into any one of the Titan stores, be it a Tanishq or a watch store, or you're buying the saris and Tanera, while you see the customer centricity there in the store, but then that is all purely driven because of the core philosophy of the organization of people centricity. We feel that if you take care of people, they will take care of business.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that, Swadesh. And, it is amazing. Like you said, that of course, there are a lot of great workplaces as a part of the community. But I think what I have seen, what is amazing is also, like you said, that it is the people who are the extended part of Titan, which is a very large number, right? It's more than 25,000 or 18,000 people overall who are vendor partners, etc. And they were treated in the same way you treated your people. And that's how that connect and the sense of community was there. And
because when you walk into a store, you don't realize whether you're walking into a company store or a franchisee store.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't know that until I really had that conversation with some of you, right? And I have been a loyal customer, and it is amazing at whether you go into a rush hour and I actually honestly have also been during the pandemic, because we had one of our colleagues getting married, and for us the safest store was to walk into a Tanishq, and that experience was amazing. So I think thank you to the whole leadership, and it is unique. Because it comes across in your conversations in respect of which corner of the city or country for that matter you're going to. Thank you for sharing that. Debasmita, moving to you, since you are from the field, right? I thought it'll be good to even start with, I think, telling our audience, of course, all of us have limited knowledge, I would say, right? I mean, because we are not in the same space as you in terms of being a certified practitioner. So just elaborate a little bit on, and we also got a few questions on, when we say mental health, right? What all would come under that? Second, I think there is just so much of stigma that we also had a time where people said that, can you use another word? Can we not call it mental health? Can we call it something else and stuff like that? And I think that was also one reason for us to name our webinar today in a certain way. And there's a secret to that halo, the topic also. So I would love for you to, give us an overview and also touch a little bit upon it.
Thank you so much, Preeti. First of all, such an honor to be here. Some of the things that Swadesh was talking about really stood out for me as well, especially that this is, and I think, even your data was pointing to that this is a silent pandemic that is here already. We're not even talking in future tense anymore. And the costs of that are not just trillions of dollars for businesses or economies, but as a mental health professional, we often look at intergenerational cycles. So one generation of employees going through severe burnout, mental health crisis, anxiety is going to affect their families. It is going to affect their children. And we are setting off a cycle that's going to take us, even if we have the best healthcare, mental health care, it's going to take us decades to clean up, if at all possible. So I think in terms of overall health costs and the opportunity costs, as well as, just the life experience, that quality of life that will be hampered is huge. So just when we think
almost
of all that,
immeasurable, I think
it's immeasurable. Yeah. And so that was just one thought that was on top of my head. But coming back to what you were saying, yes, in fact, we face the same thing where often we're asked that, we want to talk about mental health, but can we not use the word mental health? Right. And that's just one of the things that irks me a lot. And as a professional, I feel that, at least people who are aware, great places to work, the community that's advocating for mental health needs to use the word, needs to call it out for what it is. Having said that, and that's actually the way to sort of, address and break down stigma.
Sure.
But it really comes down to, for organizations at least, it really comes down to a few basic things. One is having a consistent dialogue to create awareness at different levels. So it has to be really, I think it needs to start with understanding where the awareness stands today, because each organization is unique. I'm sure when we're talking to great places to work as an organization, your awareness is far greater than maybe, I don't know, a manufacturing plant somewhere, or a sales driven organization somewhere. So it's really different. So we need to start with that. Moving on to then curating awareness for the different bands, and while we do that, build capacity. As the WHO directives also say that, we need to build capacity for our managers to be able to support the workforce. And stigma will eventually, I think, dissipate. But the only thing that needs to happen is just the consistent and really dialogue with a lot of conviction from all levels. Leadership, definitely, but also identify people at the lower levels who are willing to have that conversation. That's something that I think might help the stigma.
Preeti and Debasmita, you spoke about stigma, right? And I was having this conversation with my team members when we started. The moment you say that we have this counseling services for employees,
Right.
the numbers didn't go up. But the moment we converted to calmness coaches, look at the word, change a word. The moment you started doing that, calmness coaches, people were very comfortable calling and, going in for a calmness coach session. Okay. So just the number, the terminologies which runs, and exactly, mental health is a taboo word today, right? It becomes very difficult to convince people that it is all right. But then practically, people, even with EAP services,
I was just
I'm
to
sure
say that, yes.
EAP services, I think every other organization today, large organization, all the great places to work on organization be having EAP services. And from my experience, when we say EAP, people don't connect. And that's the reason we started this word saying that Maitri. And that is the word which we coined. And we thought that can we brand it, which is easier for people to connect to and understand. And same is the case with counselors. I mean, rather than calling counseling services, can we call calmness coaches? Because the person is doing the same stuff, right? Yeah. And we have 70 to 80 people every month taking sessions. And we're not such a large organization. And, we are still relatively small, considering many other large great places to work organizations to be present here. So thought I
couldn't agree with you more on that. We've had EAP for the longest time now, and the average utilization globally is under 5%.
Yes.
And the reason being, I think, is because people are not going to just walk up to strangers and say, look, I have a problem. I mean, very few people would actually do that. Maybe 10 to 15%, and that too does not often happen. But we have to focus on creating an environment that supports open conversations about well-being, which kind of ties back to the safety that you were talking about earlier. That once you create that safety and that culture, then people, may reach out, talk about it, or might even find help among themselves.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think it is so amazing to see that, first the thought has to be there, right? And then people will connect and come. So acceptance that, yes, we need to do something around mental health. And then, of course, for example, your example of calmness coaches or Maitri as you mentioned, Swadesh, there was another organization we were talking to, and they also just extended that simple aspect of the buddies that we usually do for new joinees. And they had, events where counselors came in and they were like buddies intermingling with people, so that that initial comfort was built. And then, of course, they were, okay to go and have those one-on-one conversations. So percentages have been abysmally low. Debasmita, as you mentioned, I think when we started, I was really stunned. I thought it'll be low meant, double digits, 10, 15, 20%. So when I took a guess the first time when we started the practice, which was, or at least took the decision, was 2018 or late 17, when we said we need to work in this area. Pandemic happened later. And we heard 2.5%. And I think it has gone up slightly in the pandemic, which is good. But we really need to make efforts, and some of these different ways of connecting definitely helps. On that, I would just like to maybe deep dive into this one aspect we spoke about, the role leaders play, and then of course how do you enable managers. Swadesh, I know that at Titan there is a signature program you had where leaders really led from the front in this particular aspect. So it'd be great if you could share a little more about that with our audience.
Yeah. So I think many organizations should have their listening posts, and so did we. And we normally conduct 2 employee engagement surveys. One is done by GPTW survey. And the second one was a signature program which we were running for almost 18 years.
Mm-hmm.
And this was straight from the managing director's office. And it was not driven by the people function while we used to facilitate it, but it was directly been driven from the managing director's office, a program called Tell Me. And after the stores were opened, and during the pandemic, we are a brick and mortar retail organization predominantly, right? And so we have manufacturing, we have retail stores. And if I have to talk about the percentage of people, I think almost 90% of people are either in manufacturing or in retail stores. And immediately after the pandemic, when the stores opened, I think we were the first one to open our stores. And with all the protective gears, I mean, people were wearing double masks, face shields. And also we wanted to create an environment where even a customer walking in should feel safe. So Titan stores were pretty safe from that point of view when we started. And this time when we were wanting to run the Tell Me survey, and earlier for 18 years we were running a survey, and we thought that it'll be better to have conversations and rather than having a survey. And the conversation with the managing director and myself, just 2 of us. And the first starting point was, how do we segment? Because one could have a conversation, you could call people in a large hall and speak to 500, 1,000 people. And many organizations would have their town halls and then have the well meetings, but many a times people don't open up. And from our own experiences, so we thought that it will be better to segment the entire employee groups, have different segments like senior leadership team, women in manufacturing, women in retail, different cadre programs which we run in the organization, MTs, GTs, diploma trainees, middle management group, first-time managers, Gen Zs. So we created a small little cohorts.
Okay.
And we thought a good conversation, if you want to have, you need at least have 8 to 10 people. You can have a decent conversation. And then also you should very carefully choose the same cohort of people. Like, if it's a GT group, it has to be GT group. If it's an MT group, it has to be MT group. Or if it is the women in manufacturing, it has to be women in manufacturing. Don't mix them with anybody else. So the problems we thought that we will just listen to people. And we did 75 hours of actual listening and moving across. And I think the journey started from February. We have gone around across the country, different regions, different manufacturing units, and had simple conversations. We listened to people. And the amount of inputs we got, and I think 2 notebooks got filled. In fact, I was jokingly telling somebody that this is my work for 2 years, right? The amount of stuff which we got from people. And that is where, the first point is to create a culture of safe to speak up, right? And the leader should take the become the example. And here we thought that to drive in a listening culture in the organization, we felt that the only way to drive a listening culture is where we will become a role model and start this conversation with people. And interestingly, and I was mentioning this to you some time back, that in one of those conversations, one of our employees, a lady employee, say that you will come and speak with us once a year. But what happens to the balance 364 days? Very powerful statement to make. And this is something which I always quote in our organizations when I'm asking people to how to create a listening organizations, because the listening has to happen on a regular basis. And we got a lot of points. If we would not have had those tell me conversations, I don't think we would have got to hear and listen the pain which a caregiver goes. And then that led us to thinking that what are the couple of policy changes we need to do for caregivers. If we would not have gone and spoken to them, we would not have heard and listened to the pain which employees with special children go through. That led us to thinking that can we make some changes? Like for an example, we give a lesser hours of working for employees with special children. I think everybody knows in the organizations. So we have a certain amount of allowance, a different allowance we give them to take care, because employees, the special children need care for the entire life. And we have currently around 30 odd employees with special children. So only when you have a conversation like that, people will open up. And that is all about, and all this initiatives would help to create that psychological, safety net, which was started with when I was speaking. I mean, all these small little things, but at the core of it is speak to people, talk to them, listen to them. Only then you will know, because the problems are very different for different categories of people.
Thank you. It's just so amazing, inspiring to hear that. And like you said, see, one is to say that, yes, we all want to, everyone said that we want to speak. People, of course, started with town hall, but two, and while you're also thinking that, okay, how do we manage business? How do we navigate? Because the challenges across, but to have that commitment and go and lead and take out that dedicated time to go across the country and speak to people across cohorts, I think absolutely amazing. And I look forward to knowing more about, and yeah, like you spoke about, it's not that there weren't caregivers earlier or people we didn't know about these things, but none of these nuances came about earlier.
It's a different thing, Preeti, when you listen to somebody narrating it. We knew that, employees with special children are there, right? But only when it comes alive, when the person in front of you explains to you what pain he or she goes through. Right? So I think I can narrate that because there were 2 notebooks full of points, and I think so much of points we got. And that is creating, and when you take care of all that, is creating a psychological safety net.
It's a very strong message, right? That there is genuine intent to learn and you care, and that's why you're there to have it addressed. So amazing. So I'll come to you this, but I'm seeing you smiling. Of course, you worked with the people at individual level, at organization levels, and I think one thing which we often hear, right, that from an intention standpoint, all of us, I mean, everyone wants to help, but it's also such a sensitive area that sometimes you don't know what to look for, or if you sense something, how do you approach? So could you share with us a few things which people could be mindful of, that also came as questions from quite a few, that what could be some of the signs people could look for to identify that, yes, does someone need help? And if I feel something, how do I approach? What's the right way?
Right. It honestly delights me so much to hear such authentic, genuine, people-centric efforts that Titan has been making. And this is so well done on so many counts. Speaking to the specific cohorts, cutting to the levels, and just directly going and talking to them. That's huge and so inspiring. But coming back to what is it that we need to pay attention to, often when when I'm having this conversation, it feels like people need to understand what the signs of depression, what the signs of anxiety are, but you don't. uh, I want to sort of emphasize here that the diagnosis, or what is wrong, or why it's happening, the context of it, is really not, I would say, not something that the colleagues need to understand so much.
Mhm.
But the only thing, and that would be enough, would be to just notice a shift. We spend so much of our times with our colleagues, so we know them, right? We know their patterns, we know how much time an individual takes to respond, when are we likely to expect certain emails from a certain people, how are they when there's a get together. We know these things about our people. When we see a shift, and for that we need to look closely, so that's the only thing that needs to happen, really. Look closely, look for shifts, whether it is absenteeism, whether it is just not interacting as much, withdrawing socially. A person who always gets dabba has been ordering food. That's
Mhm.
also a shift. So little things like that, if you just look closely, you will see it. Even so, a lot of times I get asked that, but we are working virtually, we're a completely remote organization, how do we
Yes.
see those things? You will see a shift in the voice, you will see a shift in the tone, in the energy that they bring with them. Like somebody who's always cameras on does not want to turn their camera. Little things, they're always tells. So we just notice the shift, and we open a conversation, and this is where the skill comes in, that we don't ask them what happened, or are you okay, but we really ask, we just maybe even tell them that, hey, I'm here to listen in case there is something that's going on with you, because I see you're being a little different, and it's okay. I'm here in case you need something. So just that much, and then having a very sort of well laid out process of resources that are available, channels, and making it easy for them. Now, for example, if people are working in shifts, make sure that the resources are also available in those shifts.
Mm.
If they are keeping in mind the language, little things like that, make it easy for people to access these resources, and that should be good. That should be a solid, that should lay a solid foundation for the support, um, that is so crucial.
Right.
Also, Debasmita, I think, when, training a little bit of people managers, because people managers are the one who are closest to the team
To the
members.
team.
You mentioned about, having those signs. Those signs will tell us that something is wrong with this person.
Mm,
Also, training a people manager, saying that like how he or she is going to find out that, yeah, there is something wrong, is extremely important,
absolutely.
because they are the one who are in regular touch with their team members.
Completely.
So they are the one who will drive that psychological safety net. They are the one who will build that inclusive culture. They are the one who will build that safe to speak up culture in the organization, and they are the ones who can point out if there is something is wrong. It's extremely important to train your people managers, and especially if this is a silent pandemic
Absolutely.
and we need to deal with it, I think all people managers need to be trained in understanding those signs.
I couldn't agree more. The WHO has, of course, laid this out. In fact, a recent NCRT study has also laid this out for our schools and educational institutes. So teachers, professors, as well as people managers in organizations all need to undergo a training in, of course, awareness, what to pick up, what to see, how to respond to that. Because often the response is either of alarm or dismissal, because we all carry our own bias and, our own need to deny along with us. So training in how to respond if you see something, and to be able to provide a very, very basic degree of first aid, right? Just empathy, support, reassurance, basic checks. So that's I think a pillar of all well-being strategies that are going to be adopted in the year to come, maybe.
Thank you. I think much needed also, right? Like we were just discussing that how at some point training in POSH became mandatory, and this is like the absolute first step, as you said, a very critical pillar across our organization, schools for sure. Because I think what we don't realize when we look at some of those numbers are really very disheartening, right? When we see whether we are, whether it's suicides which are on the rise, we look at lifestyle diseases for the first time have overtaken all other causes of death globally. Yeah, so yeah,
If I
absolutely.
may, I just want to share a tiny anecdote here. So I was teaching at an university a few years ago, and I would naturally end up talking to a lot of students. And one thing that I heard most was, ma'am, when I start earning, the first thing I will do is I'll get therapy. And they actually said that. And so there were therapists available, counselors available at the university, but there is again the whole, that, okay, you're part of the faculty, and so they don't feel safe speaking there. But what was interesting, and I say this, and maybe I'll get some flack for saying this, but there is a generation, that's probably acting as a barrier, that is not yet truly understood their own attitude towards mental health and well-being. So while we have trainings, I think it's important to focus on that demographic, because they are the maybe the senior leaders, and the middle management, which is acting sort of in a way that actually discourages people from seeking help. Very recently, again, I was at another organization, and we were trying to have a conversation about mental health, and there was a very poor response. And this was an organization with a lot of young people, around the age of 25, first job, second job. And the response was very poor. And I told them at the end of this that, if there's even one person who's going to remember something that we talk about, I'd be happy. I'll sleep well tonight. And I got a few messages on social media afterwards saying that, ma'am, we would love to have a conversation, but maybe in smaller groups, because we don't feel comfortable talking, in spaces like that. And this "we don't feel comfortable" was not, I'm not comfortable with my peer. It's, I'm not comfortable with the seniors, is the sense that comes through. So a lot of work is needed with that, cohort, is what I feel. Again, not to blame anyone, I'm not pointing fingers. Each generation is what it is, how they are as a result of their own experiences. They have their own narrative, but the reality today is that something needs to shift.
True. No, it is a journey, of course. And I think the good part is that we are having more conversations around it. People realize, yes, this is something that needs to be attended to. And it's not at the back of the, burner. And I think for the first time, well-being is in the forefront, which is a good thing. And I think hopefully it will only go.
Yeah.
Swadesh, you were all nodding. I'd love to know, since you mentioned you are one organization, or among the very few organizations who were, I think the very few months, which was actually the mandate, right? And you kind of chose to bring just in some great records that Titan has set in the last. So how have you managed that balance?
Yeah, so we, other than the mandated period where government mandated that we need to work from home, and only during that time we were working from home, and of course stores were shut, and obviously the entire country was shut. But the moment it opened up, and I think the way our retail organization started working, and even in corporate, we have been coming to office 100%. It's on site.
Right.
And when we took this decision of coming back to work, and people were used to, some of us were used to working from home for a couple of months, right, during the lockdown period. Felt that this was convenient, and maybe while they knew they're a little ahead of us with respect to working remotely, because even before pandemic, they used to do the same thing, right? They were used to remote working.
Yes.
It was a relatively a new concept for us, right? Working from home. And when we opened up, I think one group was not very happy, of course, saying that, like, hey, can we continue? Because we saw the benefit of the work can still happen.
Sure.
But there's a very large group. It was a big sigh of relief from them. It was a joy for them to come back to office. And we have continued since then. And then there was a lot of other discussions about having policies, to have policies, hybrid working. And we decided in our leadership team that we will be the last one to go, because we felt there is a huge amount of merit in bringing people on site. You talk about collaboration to drive innovative thinking, problem solving when you come together, and the sheer joy and passion, which I see. And I tell people that, the happiest time is the one when I walk into the lunchroom, the vibrancy which is in the lunchroom, and which was missing during the COVID times. And I used to still come into office once in a while the mandate was still there from working from home. And I was missing that, right? And we haven't gone back. Then came the discussion saying that should we not look at a flexi work policy like many other organizations? I think there was a huge amount there were seminars, discussions about hybrid working, the future of work. And there was a lot of pressure even on us saying that, like, can we have a policy of saying, can we have one day off a week? Or can we have a couple of days, work from home policy? But as we felt in the leadership team that, rather than having a policy, I think there has to be a stronger intent to help people. And so we felt we will do a genuine accommodation. I'm borrowing Debasmita's word, a genuine accommodation. Anybody who genuinely requires, if he or she is a caregiver, if you've got small kids at home to manage, and we understand that. And people have been given to work from home, having a conversation with the manager so that the work doesn't suffer. So, but we do not have a formal policy, and it's working pretty well. And maybe I would have lost, a couple of employees when they heard that we do not have a policy like that. They decided not to join us. But then a couple of them who took that leap of faith, and we told them, like, guess what? While we do not have a policy, but then we do make genuine accommodations. And when I check with them, they're saying that, no, we did the right thing by joining you. While we were asking for whether you have a flexi work policy or a remote working policy of a couple of days like other organizations, but then we are happy that we are back to work.
Right, thank you for sharing that. And yeah, I think that's the message, right? That if there's a need, we understand, and that accommodation or that flexibility is allowed. And at the end of the day, you are creating that environment of trust where people are okay to share, and you're operating in an environment of trust. I also remember, I think you mentioned that for the people who are coming into work, you do have a strict sort of a guideline called out of switching off and going back home and switching off work, which is today a rarity with most organizations.
5 o'clock, and I think 5 o'clock, and this entire office becomes empty. Almost 90% people are off.
Yeah, which is so amazing. We say you have to be here till 5:15 our time is, but it is so amazing that you're actually being able to. It's not something you've just declared. We are struggling to kind of say that no work messages after 7. We've tried to put that guideline for us, and we keep getting.
I think the stress level, Preeti, was much higher when they were working from home.
Because there was no switching off.
Yeah, the calendar management, the calendar would get filled, right? Even it'll extend up to, many people would say, hey, you're working from home, so maybe it is okay to have a meeting at 6:30, 7 o'clock. And it will continue. And the stress levels are much higher. And when I see people coming here, I feel the stress level is much, much lesser.
Yeah. No, I think it's also for companies to actually call that out, right? Saying that this is okay, this is not okay, irrespective, because each one will have our own business context. So while it may be okay, we say, okay, my productivity is not impacted if I'm working from home, but both ways, you need to see what's working. But clearly call out what's not okay, what behaviors are not okay, what are we, as an organization, what's the belief and philosophy. I think that's very, very critical. So, Debasmita, what have you seen in companies trying to help people manage their work-life balance? And from your perspective, what could be some, piece of advice? Because I was also just going through the questions that have come in. I think one is definitely around, some we've answered, I think, as we spoke. But what could be few things companies could be mindful of when they try and enable a culture like this?
Right, right. I think the answer to that is rather simple. In fact, twofold in my opinion. One is that at every level, it should be such a core value. Well-being needs to be such a core value driven by the organization, that at every level, right from the security that's standing at the gate of an organization to maybe the CEO, should be asking themselves, what can I do first for my own well-being? That's the first fold. And second, how can I make this place a little better? And at every level, if people are asking that same question, the answers are going to be very different, because what the CEO will think, and what the security will think are going to be very different, but they're all going to come together. It's all going to tie together. And along with, I just love the idea that someone needs to be listening, right? So while people are asking these questions to themselves, there has to be organizations need to strengthen their listening capacity, cut down the filters, and make the listening also like a connect, where genuine connections are fostered, and not just a survey that we fill because my manager is kind of on top of me for that. So those would be my thoughts on this. But another thing that I would want to add is, while we often encourage people to have a policy, to have a mental health policy, but that policy is more like the ceiling. Sorry, it's more like the floor. It's not the ceiling. It's the basic assured or the basic clarity that people need to know, that okay, if you have this kind of crisis, this is what you do. These are the people that you get in touch, and it remains confidential and it's safe and protected. So that, but when you're making a decision, it has to be rooted in empathy. Which is where, when we're talking about the genuine accommodations and authentic accommodations, it has to be rooted in empathy. And yeah, I think
any don'ts that you would like to be mindful, or not to do anything, to avoid?
I would say that I have, in the last especially after the pandemic, I've seen a lot of initiatives take off and fall flat. And the reason being that it seems exciting, it seems like everybody else is doing it, seems like the right thing to do. Maybe there's an article also that came out somewhere, in somewhere New York Times or whatever, which says, oh, this is great, and we take it up. But I think we really need to understand the organization, understand your own values, your own capacity, because small initiatives done consistently are far more beneficial than celebrating a mental health day, or doing like a once a year retreat or something fancy, and then the rest of the year nothing's happening. So those would be my don'ts. Like, don't just follow trends, or don't do what other organizations, competitors are doing, or do things for an accreditation or a certification, an audit.
Yeah.
Take small steps. It's what you can do every day for your people that's going to bring a shift in the environment and the culture.
Thank you for sharing that. Anything from your side, Swadesh, basis your experience? What would be must-haves?
No, I think and like currently today, if I speak about our organizations, I think business is doing well, and what. And I am not so much. I mean, I'm lucky that we have a lot of happier people in this organization, and I think the way and some of the steps we have taken, I think people are giving it back, and so there's a lot of abundance in the market. Business is doing well. What I worry is the stress level.
Hmm.
And the continuous stress level, will have to take steps to ensure that how do we mitigate stress levels
Hmm.
at the workplace, and looking at constantly. And and this is not something which just because I have a couple of policies and pass on it saying that like, okay, fine, everything is right. I need to reinvent. I need to constantly think. And the more and more I get in touch with people, I need to reflect what will make sense for them. How do I mitigate the stress level? Uh, how do I mitigate the anxiety level in people? So those are my last comments. So uh, it's an evolving, and we have. I don't think the focus on mental health has been so much before. I think it's just about we are experiencing, we're learning from each other, and but the core of it is like listen to people and follow your heart. But genuinely, if you make an effort to bring in a difference in the life of your employees, I think you're just doing the right thing.
No, thank you for sharing that. For sure, I think, and the fact that the work's not done, right? It's a journey. You have to keep listening, keep being ready for change. However close that policy or that initiative was to your heart, if it needs to change in the current context, I think we have to be open to doing that. Please do feel free to add in more questions. I mean, I know some of you've already written some questions, which I can see in the Q&A. We've answered most of them. Also, I think one question which we have got quite a bit is that, is there, do you as a practice measure like ROI, or what in your view has worked for you, because of having this employee centric culture? Or
Very difficult to measure. And like obviously, business has been doing very well after the second wave. Once the stores were open, almost all businesses, and we have had the best quarters ever. But then really pinpointing and saying that this much has been contributed by employee is difficult. You call it the pent up demand in the marketplace, and fat weddings didn't happen then, because of which people went and bought jewelries, um, and or you call it a revenge purchase by people who stores were shut. I think they were working from home, and the market opened up and there was a revenge purchase. So uh, but definitely the contribution of employees is significant. And because I mean, if had it not been so, I don't think we would have reached this level of performance, what we are experiencing today. Um, we haven't gone into, we don't measure ROI of our initiatives. But then if business is doing well, and if I'm getting a positive vibe when I speak to one-on-one, I think that gives us the maximum joy that, yeah, all our efforts are bearing
are
fruits.
going in the right direction.
And sometimes I've gone little beyond the engagement scores, honestly, Preeti. And engagement scores, yeah, engagement scores are great, it's a great barometer. But then what we hear from people when we meet them, so that is my biggest ROI.
Great, great.
So true, so true. Couldn't agree more. In fact, over the last 2 days, I've been part of several conversations, and one thing that stood out for me is, and some of them were great places to work,
Mhm.
is leaders saying that if you truly, truly prioritize people, turn it around. Don't focus on productivity and metrics like that, but focus on making people's lives better. They will give back, and I'm hearing that echoed in what Swadesh is saying as well. And some people said that don't do it for the ROI, just do it because it's the right thing to do.
True. Yeah, we've heard that from the
Part of our responsibility as leaders, as organizations, to do it. So yeah.
Yeah, that is so true. And it's, I think, research year on year showing us that some of those numbers, that if you focus on those right things, everything else becomes an outcome and a natural outcome. And how much of analytics and data and science do we need? Of course, I think the other question we are also getting is that, while we start on some of these journeys, what would there be any indicators or metrics that you could say that, yes, on the mental health front, we have done well, or ways to measure. One definitely is, I think, participation of employees in whether it is initiatives, and definitely access to counseling, etc. Any other indicators you feel people could track?
I think it is very important, to actually measure how happy people are. I
So
know
the
that happiness is a rather subjective topic, and there are so many ways to measure it. Pick one; it doesn't matter. Even if you're asking the question on one-on-one calls, and you're doing some sort of like a subjective, qualitative sort of assessment, that's fine too. But ask that question whether people are happy or not. And I think another indicator, a very important one, is are people exhausted? One of the things that happens in workplaces that maybe have some elements that are not working well for them, or some degree of toxicity, um, makes people want to leave, is what we saw. But before that, what happens is people feel exhausted. Sometimes it's the workload, but it's also the emotional burden of having to worry about, oh, what is my boss thinking? Oh my God, there's so much competition. Oh, I have to do this. All of this drains our energy, mental and physical. So exhaustion, I think, would be one of the earliest indicators and can be very easily measured. One question is enough to measure exhaustion in your organization. And if the numbers are high, then that is definitely an indicator that something's not going well. Um, and along those lines, I think I would also sort of take this opportunity to say that we really sometimes may almost, like, when I say this, I almost feel as if I'm telling people that, hey, well-being is your responsibility. Take better care of yourselves. Do practices of, let's say, well-being, or exercise, sleep, etc. But I also sometimes see around me that we really need to revisit the number of hours, the number of employees available, and the workload that is there. So it's a thought that it can't just be employees trying, though there is the halo, that we you're so rightly identified, that individual well-being will definitely amplify, it will spread. But there are certain organizational factors which also need to be checked regular intervals.
Sure.
So
No, it's definitely a two-way street. Thanks for.
I think the other thing, Preeti, the other thing which we check is our, the EAP or the Maitri report, which we get every quarter, saying that what kind of a calls people received. It also gives me some bit of an indication, saying that, like, if I have to design some interventions, it gives me some pointers. These are the areas,
True.
whether it is manager induced stress, okay, or is family issues. So that gives me a lot of pointers when I look at the report. And of course, and there is no name mentioned, it's anonymous, you don't get to know who had made those calls, you just get
Just
an
the areas to kind of then
Yeah.
accordingly design. Yeah, I think
But we do an assessment which is actually a very comprehensive assessment of well-being, which takes care of your strengths, your coping resilience, as well as the risk factors that you could be facing, and that's followed up with a debrief. So even having systems or assessments like that built into your process is
helps. Yeah.
is
I
the way
think
to
those
go.
are tools kind of give that input. Yeah, thank you for your questions. I think we have probably maybe the last that we can take. I think Aditi, what you're mentioning is, so this is somebody who's mentioning about, again, the low uptake of EAP, and also mentioning that we are an NGO, so funds are important. So I think some things that we discussed, hopefully those are inputs on how do you encourage people. It's one, of course, they need to know it's anonymous, but I think the other of encouraging through, whether we heard Maitri or Calm, essentially, how do we convey that message that this is for your benefit, nobody is watching you, but I think please go speak, and these are available to you as you need them. Yeah, great. Anything, I think, even before we close, and also for the audience, we will share, I think, whatever inputs we have, and anything, if I feel if it's not answered or something, we'll try and see if we can get some tips or some of our best practices from our research sent over to you. Thank you so much for sharing and making this conversation richer. One last thing, I think, before we close, I would love to ask each of you is that while we discussed about how do you make people feel more psychologically safe, etc., I think as leaders and for you as a practitioner, Debasmita, we all also have our own stresses, right? And how do you manage that for yourself? So for both of you, what has worked for you personally to manage your well-being and then be available to others? It'd be love to know any one thing which worked for you.
Um,
Any one of you would like to
yeah,
go
I'll
first?
go. I'll go first. So I think overall happiness at work is to a large extent driven by if it aligns with your purpose or not. And that's one area that I feel very fortunate. That I find alignment with my own purpose, what I wanted to do, and that's exactly what I'm doing. So that, having said that, I think seeking support is something when I need to from coworkers is something that has always worked. Seeking support from professionals is also something that has worked. And regular breaks is something that is an absolute essential for me to keep functioning. Along with mentors who can from time to time tell us that, okay, course correct, or you're going in the right direction, or that this is okay at this point.
Okay.
And it's okay to be going through what you're going through, it'll pass. Just that reassurance coming from mentors has played an important role.
Thanks.
I think couldn't agree with you more, Debasmita. And I think it's, even showing your vulnerability, right? Sometimes, it's extremely important, and that is what genuine leadership is all about. And if you're feeling stressed, speak to your team, and then they will come and help you. And you didn't mention it. Speak. I think it's nothing like, and everybody will go through the stress level, irrespective of. I don't think it differentiates, right, with level.
Yeah.
So I think the maximum stress level possibly could be the leaders facing today, and it is all right even for the leaders to come out and say and seek help.
Yeah.
And that's how I do.
Usually, yes.
That's what I do. I mean, if I am stressed and for something, for some reason, I would in and around, I would ask my colleagues to help me out.
And the best part is there are always people there to help. I think it's just for us to kind of say that it's okay for me to ask for help. And I think it's usually tough for us to do, but it's good.
In fact, we are a remote organization, but there are clusters in different cities.
Okay.
And often when one of us in Pune is having a bad day, we just call for a work together.
Okay.
So we get together somewhere at a co-working space, at a cafe, whatever you feel like, and we work together. And that has been like a huge hit. So we don't even ask if somebody's asking, okay, let's get together and work today. It's just a signal that, okay, she needs company or connection, or he needs a little help, and we just do it. So that has been working well for us too.
Thank you. Thank you so much, both of you, for investing your time and sharing your experiences. I'm sure our people found it meaningful. We'll be sending you like a summary of our insights as well as the recording. And do keep sharing your feedback. It also helps us to strengthen, this journey. And thank you once again for the.
Thank you very much, Preeti, and thanks to everybody who joined the call, and really goes on to show that how much they care and how much they want to make a change in the workplace, and really recognizing that mental wellness is important to deal with.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Thank you.
Resonate with that completely. Thank you so much for staying and listening to the conversation. Let's just keep having more conversations like this. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Have a great evening ahead, everyone. Thank you.